and it took a lot of courage and a lot of time and money. So please welcome Tarun Tejpal.
Thank you, everyone. No matter how many times you look at this footage, it's always very moving. And I remember when we were doing this investigation and the expose and the material was beginning to come in, I don't think there was anybody at the Tehelka who was excited. You know, journalists live for the big story, and big stories excite us. I remember when we broke Operation West End in 2001, the story that exposed the corruption in arms procurements. We had a great deal of excitement. There was fear, but there was also excitement. But this time, almost every editor in Tehelka who was dealing with this story was actually fairly depressed. And when you look at the testimony of these men, when you look at Babu Bajrangi talking, when you look at the other perpetrators of the mass murders talking, you really wonder about the idea of India. It's very difficult to feel elated that you've done a great story when the story shows a kind of thought process that's creating the kind of people Babu Bajrangi are. And the most terrifying thing about the Tehelka tapes, the tapes are about 50 hours. What was broadcast was about 4 hours, but the raw tapes are about 50 hours, which have now been handed over to the National Human Rights Commission and to the Nanavati Commission. The most frightening thing about these tapes for us was the absence of remorse. When you look at Babu Bajrangi, when you look at the other men we got on tape, there is no remorse. They are murdered, they are raped, they are killed, but there is no remorse. These people don't belong to any religion. These guys are all beyond religion, because I'm among those who believes that there is no religion that sanctions violence against innocents of any kind. You know, for very many years, Tehelka has been very famous for its anti-corruption journalism. And as Manzoor Bhai said very kindly, we have paid a very heavy price for it in the past. For 3 years we were shut down, 3 of my colleagues were arrested. My office of 125 people came down to 4 people. We did no journalism for 3 years, we fought only legal cases. More than 30 lawyers represented us in India. The greatest lawyers of India represented us, many of them for free. Even today, the cases of those years still go on. We still go to court almost every other month to take bail on non-bailable offences, totally trumped up cases, false cases. But what has also happened in those years was the kind of goodwill and admiration you got from across the country. And Tehelka actually came back in 2004 after 3 years of only fighting the old government, which was the India government of that time, again the BJP government, and has continued to do the kind of hard public interest journalism that it has set itself as its mandate. Even at the time when we were formally associated with anti-corruption journalism, and I used to be called to speak at fora like these, I used to always start by saying that though we are associated with anti-corruption journalism, for me, the single greatest challenge facing India today is the threat of communalism. And we have been borne right on that again and again over the last 7 years. These tapes again reminded us that that threat is truly the greatest threat. And today I would temper it a little by saying, for me, the 2 greatest threats in India are communalism and inequality. Not corruption, but inequality. I mean, I think the big challenge that we face in inequality is somewhere the scale of inequality we have in India feeds both into corruption and into communalism. And as we go forward and our challenges mount, I think both of these things will have to be addressed simultaneously. I met the Prime Minister about a few months ago, before our expose, and I remember the first thing the Prime Minister said to me, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, he put his hand on my knee and he sat me down and he said, Tarun, I'm really scared for this country, I'm worried for this country. And he said he was worried, most of all, for the communal virus. Having said that, and I know he was sincere, he's an honest man, he's a sincere man, he's a good man. Having said that, it remains a scandal that the Indian government has shown so little political will and so little political vision in the entire episode to do with the Gujarat carnage of 2002, leading up to our expose now, and the absence of any action post our expose. There are any number of people in India, civil rights workers, lawyers, who feel very strongly that after our expose, the state, the center, should have moved and imposed President's rule in Gujarat, I mean, I remember you saw our executive editor Sankarshan Thakur on the screen just now. I remember Sankarshan Thakur in that same interview telling the anchor, the TV anchor, and he said very clearly, he said, is Gujarat not a part of India? Is the Prime Minister of India not the Prime Minister of Gujarat? Is the Constitution of India not applicable in Gujarat? If it is, then why does the state not move? Why does the center not move? This remains a mystery for all of us. And what it hints to is a kind of absence of political will that is becoming disturbing, that worries us, and the fact that every decision that takes place at the national level is today calibrated on the business or basis of vote calculations and electoral calculations means that some of these crises will not be addressed even in the years to come unless things change fundamentally. There are two things that went really wrong with Gujarat. Two things that did not happen. Our expose, I'll tell you very briefly, I think Manzoor Bhai gave you some idea. Basically what our expose showed was, for 5 years, since 2002, there have been various versions of what happened in Gujarat. There has been the version of the victims, and you heard those in Rakesh Sharma's film, a very moving film. There have been the versions of the state, that's the BJP government at the state, which has another kind of version. There's the version of the police, there's the version of the bureaucracy, there's the version of the media, and the media version itself is two kinds of versions, the local media version and the national media version. Now, in all these contending versions, it became very easy for those who had been responsible to somehow escape all responsibility and get away from what they had done. What Tehelka's expose did, and the expose took about 6 months, was it got for the first time, in the words of the men who had committed these mass murders, the truth of the murders. This was what we did then. This is the cover story. We called it the most important story of our time. I've been a journalist for 24 years. I've been an editor with some of the most important publications in India. I've been personally involved with some of the greatest investigations that have been done in India. But I can tell you, I had no doubt when the investigations findings began to come into our office, that this was the most important story of our time. It says the truth, Gujarat 2002, in the words of the men who did it. Why is it the most important investigation of our time? It is the most important investigation of our time because the communal fault line in India is the most dangerous fault line. We have paid sporadically a price for it over the last 60 years, but 60 years ago, we paid a very heavy price for it. At the time of the partition of India, close to 1 million people were massacred, Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs, over the whole business of religion and how it should be accounted for, should account for itself in public life. Two things could have happened in Gujarat in the last 5 years. The first is the steal of law and order. I mean, the state, the center, should have acted with impartial sense of justice and enforced law and order. It's the only way good societies, healthy societies survive. I can tell you out here, you go out there and you break the law and somebody will pick you up within a day. You go and incite religious bigotry out there and somebody will pick you up. It doesn't matter what Mr. George Bush is saying and how off-kilter his own remarks are, but the processes work. The basic processes of law and order work. What has happened in Gujarat is that the fundamental processes of law and order in a democratic society have failed completely. The testimonies that we gathered, and there is, as I told you, 50 hours of testimonies, show how the entire legal process was subverted. How Babu Bajrangi, after he had committed his murders, was actually told by the Home Minister of Gujarat to escape, to leave the state. The Home Minister, whose responsibility it is to enforce law and order in the state, actually told Babu Bajrangi, तुम अभी गुजरात छोड़ के चले जाओ. And not only did he escape from Gujarat, Babu Bajrangi was then given shelter in Mount Abu under the government's instructions. And when the heat got too much back home, a staged arrest was organized for Babu Bajrangi. He was brought back and there was a staged arrest. And then Babu Bajrangi tells in his own testimony, and these are really very revealing testimonies. In his testimony he says that when he went up in court against the first magistrate said, तुम्हारे जैसे आदमी को फांसी एक बार नहीं 10 बार मिलनी चाहिए. He said, you are such a beast that you should be hanged 10 times. What happened? That particular magistrate was transferred. A second magistrate was brought in. The second magistrate almost said the same thing after he examined Babu Bajrangi's case. He said, you should be hanged not once, but 10 times. Men like you are animals. What happened? The second magistrate was transferred. And Babu Bajrangi tells the story himself. He says कि मोदी भाई ने हमें मुझे कहा और ये सब हुआ. उन्होंने कहा फिक्र मत करो अभी सब ठीक हो जाएगा. And the third magistrate was brought in. And